Please join me for the responsive reading from Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands.
Day after day,
They pour forth speech.
night after night, they reveal knowledge.
They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. The rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden's soft flame. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Mellow is the color of my true love's hair in the morning when we rise. In the morning when we rise, that's the time, that's the time I love the best. Blue is the color of the sky in the morning when we rise. In the morning when we rise, that's the time, that's the time I love the best. Green is the color of the sparkling corn in the morning when we rise. In the morning when we rise, that's the time,
That's the time.
that's the time
That's the time
I love the best. Mellow is the feeling that I get when I see you. When I see you. Uh-huh. That's the time.
That's the time.
That's the time
That's the time
I love the best. Freedom is a word I rarely use without thinking. Uh-huh. Without thinking. Uh-huh. Of the time when I've been loved. Morning. So a few weeks ago, I was sitting on a porch at a cottage outside of Beulah where Andrea and I had taken a long weekend, and I was reading a book about the saints, and out of nowhere up came this friendly chocolate lab onto the porch and clicked his way across the porch, put his head on my lap, and nuzzled up against me. You know, that's the cool thing about dogs. They just think, like, immediately, you are like the greatest thing in the world, you know? It's like, hey, Mr. Man, could I just come up and, like, put my head on your lap for a minute? That would be awesome. So there we sat, Buster and me. He looked like a Buster to me, and I was petting him, and he was loving being petted, and so I put down my book because Buster was taking up most of my lap. And then Andrea called out from the kitchen, breakfast in 10 minutes. I'm like, all right, 10 minutes, wow. That seems like a nice long time. And I just closed my eyes with Buster on my lap, and I listened to the sounds of the morning, you know, the birds and the faraway cars going by and another dog barking somewhere, and just kind of sank into that moment, really just immersed myself in this sacred summer stillness. And all time seemed to just kind of lose meaning for a second there, and 10 minutes didn't seem to be like a very real idea. It was just me and Buster on the porch having a break from time. I have the idea that you can slow down time if you make a point of it. Buddhist monks know how to do this. They know how to do this in meditation and by slowing down their breathing. So Buster was kind of being my Buddhist monk right there, inviting me to slow down my mind. So instead of racing ahead mentally to like the next thing that I wanted to do or had to do, or going back mentally to something I had done or hadn't finished doing, I just focused on this thing, this moment. And the more I sat there, the larger that moment became, sort of swelling into the warm summer air. And there really was no next thing except breakfast, whenever that happened. Summer has a way of issuing that invitation to us to slow down time. The year goes by in this mad rush, but the days of summer don't fly away like that, like leaves pages off a calendar. They more unfold gracefully like a plant opening towards the sun. You could say the rest of the year is like a basketball game, like these constant fast breaks, lurching back and forth, back and forth. And summer is more like a baseball game, where it just proceeds at this sort of deliberate, peaceful pace. Or as some would say, this maddeningly boring pace of slowness. And that's fine with me, because after 9 months of fast breaks, I am totally fine with being bored for a little bit. Now, summertime falls during the period of the Christian calendar called ordinary time. And I really love that term of ordinary time, just plain ordinary time. Days going by, nothing dramatic, sort of a sleepy succession of days throughout the summer. I think of summer as kind of a magic time. It's birds, happily greeting the day in the morning, and the fireflies decorating the sky in the evening. And it's the sparkling corn and the blue sky and the wet garden and the spectacular sunset. Ray Bradbury describes it this way in his classic book, Dandelion Wine, which is about a boy's summertime experiences in a small Illinois town. It was a quiet morning, the town covered over with darkness and at ease in bed. Summer gathered in the weather. The wind had the proper touch, and the breathing of the world was long and warm and slow. I really like that. The breathing of the world was long and warm and slow. You had only to rise, lean from your window, and know that this indeed was the first real time of freedom and living. This was the first morning of summer. Douglas Spaulding, age 12, freshly wakened, let summer idle him on its early morning stream. A whole summer lay ahead to cross off the calendar day by day. He would be clothed in trees and bushes and rivers. It's magic the way that summer can slow down time if you choose to let it do so. Because summer calls our attention to the particulars of creation, invites us to calm our minds and slow down our breathing. When we were up in Beulah, Andrew and I went out to Frankfurt Beach for an evening to watch the sun go down. And we just looked at the sun, just sort of imperceptibly going down and down and down. And it took a long time. And it was totally worth it for just that brief moment of glory when the sun finally went under the horizon. This slowing, focusing effect is the zen of summer. It has a lot to teach us about time and beauty and gratitude all year round, I think. The zen of summer has something to do with the moist, warm air, which sort of lulls you into inactivity, right? It's like the dog on the porch. The dog really knows how to let summer slow the dog down. It's the warm, the bees are buzzing. It's not really worth the effort to go chase a car, Let's stay on the porch and put our head on this cool guy's lap. Let's do that for a while. I think here of my dear neighbor, Carolyn Morrison, taking morning walks around our neighborhood with her dogs, Zeke and Zeb. I'd be on my porch reading a book or writing a column or something, and Carolyn would walk by and with her dogs, Zeke and Zeb would just trot up onto my porch like I was a rest stop on I-96. And they'd plop down in the shade, and then okay, we're here for a while. So Carolyn and I are like, okay, well, let's sit and talk, because, the dogs need to rest, And, summer also traditionally is like a break in the action, right? You're sort of given tacit permission to maybe leave a little bit early on Friday, get in a little late on Monday. No one's going to dock your pay because, the boss took all of Friday off. And then here in West Michigan, which is so beautiful, you're never more than 15 minutes from the water. Lake Michigan's just like a pleasant drive away. You're constantly tempted to put away your work and head to the beach or a bike trail or just take a walk through the neighborhood and say, hey, how you doing, neighbor? Hot enough for you? In the midst of such abundant beauty, it can feel downright sinful to sit inside and hammer away at a keyboard or a floorboard. It's almost like you're ignoring the majesty of creation. It's like there's all this great stuff outside, beautiful, creative beauty. As Psalm 19 says, the heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. And you're like, yep, whatever. I'll get to that glorious handiwork here in a second. I got to meet my deadline. I got a deadline on this budget thing here. Those deadlines, they drive me crazy. They rule our lives most of the time. The very word deadline summons up images of crinkled up wads of paper and torn out sheds of hair. I mean, it's just like, just saying deadline can make you break out into a sweat. It's because you only have a certain amount of time to get done the thing that you need to get done. And if you don't get it done, you're dead, figuratively speaking. If you have a deadline, it makes time go faster, right? Because you're racing the clock. You're racing. There's never enough time to get it done. In newspaper business, which I worked in for 35 years, the deadline just like sat hunched on your shoulder like a demon all day long, you know? Get it done, get it done. Every day it was a race against the clock to produce that terribly important city commission story that you all could read 24 hours later. Those were the days of the newspaper industry. 24-hour news, that's us. 24 hours late. It was good while it lasted. But usually there aren't as many deadlines in the summer because basically no one wants them. This comes largely from our childhood when we all had summer vacation from school, right? So, I mean, time went slowly then, you know. You'd go spend a week at a cottage, a week at camp maybe, played 1,000 games of marbles. By the end of summer, you were generally ready to go back to school. You kind of, yeah, okay, all right. But time was really, really slow. So we still carry that mythical framework in our heads of summer as being time off from school, or work in our cases. Of course, it's not really. Most of us still have to do our jobs during the summer. Some of us have harder work in the summer. If you're roofing houses or farming or laying asphalt, and you're putting up all those orange signs all over town. So it's like, you know, oh, Bridge Street is closed and we can't get through on Fulton either? Oh, come on. Jeez, when does this end? It seems kind of unjust that we have to work during the summer. It's just not right. We're supposed to be off from school. So if possible, we work as little as possible. And we make the hours of leisure last as long as we can. Now, in making leisure last longer, there's simply nothing better than baseball. My opinion. I went to this game on Thursday where Mr. Doyle was and my friend Ken Sheppers as well. Tigers game down at Comerica Park. That game took 3 hours and 26 minutes. About 3 of those minutes, by the way, were taken up by a black squirrel running around on the field. It was fascinating. If you've never seen like 9 baseball players and 4 umpires standing around trying to figure out what to do about a squirrel, who's going to grab the squirrel? Where do we put the squirrel? The squirrel's running across the infield. Oh, and now he's in the outfield. Oh my gosh. It was wonderful. The average baseball game lasts a little under 3 hours. Now that is a long time to devote your attention to one single activity. Some of us misguided souls do this more than 100 times a summer. After all, a Major League Baseball season is 162 games long, up to another 20 if you're in the playoffs. Now, if you watched all those games, I figured this out, that's close to 500 hours, which is more than 20 complete days. I'm so sorry, Andrea. But besides eating up unreasonable amounts of time, baseball has its own zen and its own lessons to teach about time. For one thing, there is no limit to a baseball game. There is no time limit. Theoretically, it could go on forever, and I know sometimes it seems like that to many of you, but there's a W.P. Kinsella novel, the guy who wrote the Field of Dreams book, called The Iowa Baseball Confederacy, where a Chicago Cubs game lasts more than 2,000 innings. You see, Andrea, it could be worse. So in baseball, there is no deadline. There's no deadline. The game will only be over once it's over. That's not a bad way to approach any activity, is it? You just do what is necessary to do it well, however long it takes. And the pace of play in baseball is so, shall we say, deliberate. So before every pitch, the pitcher, picks up the rosin bag, tugs at his cap, takes a look around the stadium, looks in for the catcher's sign, shakes it off. Okay, all right, that's good. Then he starts his windup. Meanwhile, the batter has stepped out of the box. He tugs at his cap. He knocks the dirt off his cleats. Kind of does this. He adjusts his batting gloves and goes like this, like Poppy does, and steps back, and he kind of wiggles his foot, and he gets a stance, and then he's ready to go. And then the action's ready to start, and the pitcher winds up, and batter called timeout. Start again. This goes on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times during a regular baseball game before something actually happens. The whole thing is like an elaborate ballet or kabuki play. Meanwhile, you, the fan, are simply watching and waiting for something to happen. This takes focus and it takes patience, which is, again, not a bad way to approach any activity because the patience very often is rewarded. So in Thursday's game, after the squirrel had run around the field, and it was getting late in the day, along about 4:35, it was getting hot, rush hour is starting, you're kind of like, game is tied. How long will this game last? Is this going to be the 2,000 inning game? Bottom of the ninth, game is tied. Batter on first for the Tigers. Ian Kinsler steps up to the plate. I'm on the third base sign, by the way. And I had this thought just before it happened. He takes a swing, and the ball takes this long, beautiful arc down the left field line. Beautiful, pure white baseball flying against a pure blue sky. The left fielder leaps, reaches out his hand, and the ball lands just beyond his glove for a 2-run walk-off home run. The stadium exploded. All that time, all that patience, all that watching and waiting for 15 seconds of sheer unadulterated glory. Just unexpurgated joy. It was just wonderful. That was a memorable moment, along with the moment that Dave will remember of getting the foul ball, getting the ball. Part of baseball's timeless beauty, I think, is those moments. I will always remember that moment. Ken will always remember, David will always remember that in a moment. I remember when my son Max here, probably 20 years ago, I took him to his first game at Tiger Stadium, the old Tiger Stadium, with my father, who had taken me to Tiger Stadium when I was a boy, and he had gone to Tiger Stadium when he was a boy back in the Depression. And we walked into that beautiful enclosed space and that big, wide green field opening up. And it was sort of a world outside of time, just right in there, in that little sanctuary of baseball, kind of like here. Green field, spectators. Now, slow as the game already is, some players have a way of what they call slowing the game down. You ever hear that? When Miguel Cabrera gets up to bat, say, you can really slow the game down. It's like, what are you talking about? It's already pretty slow. But slowing the game down means that the batter focuses only on just a couple things, on the pitcher, on where the fielders are, on what the situation is, all other distracting thoughts. What are you going to eat for dinner tonight? What's going on outside the ballpark? Who's that guy yelling in the stands at you? All those things are screened out to just focus on a couple key things so that you can hit the ball without thinking about hitting the ball. Okay? You're just doing it. That is slowing the game down. It's said that Ted Williams, the great Ted Williams, could slow the game down so much that he could see the seams on the baseball as it came at him about 90 miles an hour. So time seems to slow down, seems to get slower when you're slowing the game down consciously. Now, this has a lot to do with what we call staying in the moment, right? Never, don't let your mind jump ahead. Don't let your mind jump backwards. Just stay right there, like me and Buster on the porch. On especially hectic days, I try to slow the game down, to just focus on what I'm doing, not the things that are 4 or 5 steps down the line. So if it's a story I'm writing, for instance, and my mind is kind of buzzing, I'll just okay, let's just do this section right here. Let's just do this sentence. Let's just focus on this sentence and get this sentence really good. And then we'll go on to the next thing. Or if I'm with a friend and my mind's got all kinds of things, worries going on, plans, whatever, I'll just focus on the friend. And what is the friend saying to me? And how can I respond to the friend and be a friend to the friend? Or if it's in the evening and I'm feeling restless, I'll just go out in my yard and pick weeds. Focus on each little weed. Do you ever just sit there and do nothing? Don't check your phone for the latest Facebook. Don't problem solve. Don't think ahead to worrying about tomorrow and how are you going to do this or that. Just be there, sitting there, doing nothing. My dad used to do this after working in the yard, and he'd sit by the corner of the barn and just let the sun beat on his face, just like this sort of noble, wise Indian, just like sitting there in the moment. And I learned so much from that. Henry David Thoreau sometimes spent whole mornings doing nothing but sitting in his doorway, gazing at the trees, while the birds sang and flew through his house. He called this the bloom of the present moment. And he considered it more important than any work he could have spent that time doing. He wrote, "I grew on those seasons like corn in the night, and they were far better than any work of the hands would have been." Or as the great prophet Yogi Berra put it, you can observe a lot just by watching. Heaven knows we can stand to slow the game down a little bit, can't we? Time seems so much faster now, or maybe it's just me, just because I'm getting a little older and I'm more aware of the time that's left. But I think it's the speed of the era. There's things coming at us all the time, things coming at us on television. There's sound everywhere, There's Google alerts pinging on our calendars. And silence is not really respected. Productivity and activity are what are valued most these days. The deadlines just never end. Even summer, even as sweet and slow as summer is, there's a little sadness because you're aware that it's going to end, You can be sitting on the patio with friends, drinking wine, having a nice talk, and you blink your eyes and it's Labor Day. And what do you do with that? What do you do with how do you savor a moment even as it's going away from you? A friend of mine who has Buddhist leanings tells me this is a matter of being grateful for what is and accepting what will be. There is some sadness in summer passing, but he says, there's comfort in the anticipation of autumn and all its glories. And when winter comes, well, there will be beauty there too, although it'll be a little more cold. Even as time speeds up, hurtling towards Christmas like a runaway comet, and then on to spring break and graduation open houses, we can close our eyes if we choose to and bring back summer for a moment and slow down the game of our life. When I want to let the spirit of summer slow down my game, I think of an afternoon in Northport some years ago. I was up there on a vacation and I was sitting on a bench in front of an antique store. Max was sitting next to me slugging down a can of pop, as he was usually doing in those days. Across the street, a guy stopped his truck and got out and went into the bakery. A couple strolled by, taking their time. Some boys came by, circling on their bicycles. And it was like a strange kind of stillness descended on the whole scene. A reverie of nothing changing, like the past and the present were one. It was like I was watching a memory as it happened. Later out at Old Mission Point, I watched as a dad was holding his baby daughter above the waves, and the mom was taking pictures of them. And I looked up at the lighthouse, and I looked out at the beautiful lake, and I looked down at the stones under the water. And it was all the gospel of nature, reminding me of Earth's ancient, timeless beauty. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word.